It was a Sunday afternoon, the kind of lazy day tailor-made for video games, leftover pizza, and exactly zero human interaction. Rain tapped gently against the windowpane of my modest one-bedroom apartment like it was trying to lull me into a nap. I had just settled into a heated online match, headset on, snacks within reach, life at a cozy 10 out of 10. The digital battlefield was raging, I was in the zone, until 3 aggressive, skin-prickling bangs on my front door shattered my flow that I flinched so hard my character got sniped mid-reload. The banging came again, this time with the unmistakable shrillness of someone who considered doorbells beneath them. Reluctantly, I peeled myself from my chair, muting the angry teammates in my ear. I opened the door to a vision of pure suburban outrage, mid-40s, shoulder-length overprocessed blonde hair stuck to her face from the rain, holding a drenched iPhone aloft like it was a search warrant. You. What did you do? I blinked. Hello? My movie stopped downloading at 98%, she shrieked, jabbing the air with her phone like she was casting a curse. I've been trying to watch 50 Shades Freed for the past 2 hours, and it suddenly says, network error. This is your fault. I'm sorry, who are you? I asked, not even trying to mask the confusion on my face. Karen, she snapped, like I should have already known. Upstairs. We share the same building, which means we share the same Wi-Fi space. I paused, then slowly closed the door halfway, cautiously. Wait, are you saying you've been using my Wi-Fi? I was using it, she said matter-of-factly. Until it mysteriously disappeared. You clearly changed something. I stared at her, trying to process the insanity dripping from each syllable like the rain off her knockoff handbag. You were stealing my internet? It's not stealing, she scoffed. It's ambient. It was unprotected. I had access. That's practically implied consent. Ma'am, I said, channeling every ounce of sarcasm I could muster, this isn't a free-range chicken farm. That's not how Wi-Fi works. She gasped, offended like I'd slapped her with a wet sock. I have the right to accessible entertainment. It's 2025. I'm a taxpayer. I tried to stay polite, though a snort almost escaped. Karen, I'm pretty sure you pay taxes to the city, not to my router. She ignored me entirely, brushing past my words like an infomercial skip button. You have unlimited data. I saw your plan from the router model. There's no reason you need to be this stingy. You looked up my internet plan from the box in the hallway? I said in disbelief. You're stalking my modem? Don't try to gaslight me. I know my rights. I leaned against the doorframe, still not believing this was real. And what exactly are you asking me to do here? She huffed like it was the dumbest question she'd ever heard. Turn it back on. Or give me the new password. No, then I'll sue. I laughed. Not sarcastically, not cruelly, just from genuine shock. It burst out of me like carbonated disbelief. You're going to sue me, for not letting you steal my Wi-Fi? Absolutely, she said, adjusting her drenched jacket with the confidence of someone about to represent themselves and lose badly. You've emotionally distressed me. I was halfway through a very powerful scene when it stopped. I've suffered. I have rights. And I will see you in court. With that, she turned on her heel and stormed back up the stairs, water squishing in her knockoff leather boots. I watched her go, blinking in stunned silence, waiting for someone, anyone, to jump out and tell me I was being pranked, but no one came. No cameras. No hidden crew, just me, a muted headset, and the haunting realization that I had just met a woman willing to go to legal war over Wi-Fi she wasn't even paying for the rest of the night. I couldn't shake it. It wasn't just the absurdity, it was the sheer confidence with which she marched down the steps of reason, armed only with entitlement and a wet iPhone. Still, I figured she'd cool off. Maybe she'd realize how insane it sounded. Maybe, deep down, she just needed someone to say no to her for once in her life. So I brushed it off and went back to gaming. The next morning, I opened my door to head out for groceries, and found a document taped to it. A printed out letter. Formal language. Bad grammar. Signed Karen McGill. She was officially notifying me that I would be served a small claims lawsuit for intentional withholding of communal digital resources, emotional sabotage, and, my personal favorite, willful interruption of cinematic enjoyment. I read it 3 times. She was actually serious, somewhere in her brain. Between pirating softcore smut and accusing me of cybercrime, she had come to the conclusion that I was the criminal. I couldn't help but laugh again. But this time it was nervous laughter. Because as ridiculous as it was, she really had filed something. And now, technically, I was going to court, over Wi-Fi. I called my buddy Sam, who was in law school. He laughed so hard he dropped his burrito, then said, "She doesn't have a leg to stand on, but bro, please fight this. It'll be legendary." And deep down, I knew I had to, not just for my internet, not even for justice, but because if I didn't stop her now, Karen was going to keep marching through life with the confidence of a 5G signal, and the ethics of dial-up, and maybe, just maybe, it was time someone unplugged her for good. I didn't think she'd actually go through with it. Honestly, I chalked the whole "I'll sue you" bit up to idle threats, the kind of thing people say when they've lost control of a situation and need to feel powerful again. But 3 days later, I got a formal court summons in the mail. Her name was on it, filed. Stamped. Real. Karen McGill was officially suing me over my Wi-Fi. I stood in my kitchen, holding the letter like it was an alien artifact. The grounds for the case were listed as denial of digital access, intentional emotional disruption, and, I kid you not, malicious termination of lifestyle comfort. I wasn't sure whether to call a lawyer or a therapist. Later that week, I showed up to the preliminary court hearing hoping, that maybe she'd back out. Maybe this was all some kind of elaborate ego stunt. But there she was, seated confidently in the hallway, wearing what I assume was her idea of a power suit, a blindingly pink blazer with shoulder pads large enough to signal aircraft. She had a rolling briefcase with her. A full-sized binder. Tabs and color-coded stickies. She looked like a parody of a corporate villain from an 80s movie, minus the charm. When the judge called us in, she stood up like she was about to defend the Constitution. I gave my name. The judge nodded, then looked at Karen, who immediately launched into a monologue before anyone asked her to speak. "Your Honor," she began, "I've been the victim of an unspeakable injustice. The defendant," she pointed at me like I was a war criminal, "has revoked my access to digital sustenance in a cruel and deliberate act. I have suffered emotional strain, cinematic deprivation, and a disruption of my daily routine, which I believe falls under lifestyle harm." The judge paused, blinks. "I'm sorry, you're suing him for Wi-Fi?" Karen puffed up. "He changed the password, knowing full well I rely on that connection for daily use. It was ambiently accessible before, which constitutes implied permission." "That's not a thing," the judge muttered under his breath. Karen continued, undeterred. "And furthermore, I had already begun several film downloads at the time of this sabotage, including, but not limited to, 50 Shades Freed, Legally Blonde 2, and the extended edition of Twilight, Breaking Dawn. My progress was interrupted. I could feel the embarrassment seeping into my bones. I stepped forward, carefully choosing my words. "Your Honor, I never gave her permission to use my network. She admitted to accessing it without asking. I changed the password for security reasons, and now she's accusing me of digital assault?" Karen made a noise like a tea kettle boiling over. "Objection. He's trivializing my trauma." The judge sighed. He looked like a man rethinking every life choice that led him to that courtroom. He rubbed his temples and said, "We'll set an official hearing. Ms. McGill, you'll need to bring evidence of damages. Mr. Brooks, same to you. But I'm warning you both, this isn't an episode of daytime television. Please don't treat it like one." Karen looked positively victorious. I wanted to scream. After the hearing, she strutted out of the courtroom like she'd just nailed the final act of Legally Blonde. I tried to keep walking, but she actually stopped me in the parking lot. "I'm giving you one last chance," she said, her tone smug. "Restore my access and I'll drop the case." "Karen," I said, opening my car door, "this isn't The Godfather. You're not offering me a deal. I'm not the one doing anything illegal." She leaned in. "You think the judge is going to care about your little sob story? I've got data. Screen recordings. I know my rights." I wanted to argue. I really did. But some arguments just suck the life right out of you. So I shut the door and drove off. Back at home, things only got worse. Karen started leaving notes on my door. Handwritten, passive-aggressive rants about how I was crippling the communal energy of the building and how my monopolization of resources was morally unforgivable. She posted flyers in the hallway, warning, "Selfish tenant below. Hoards internet. Hates freedom." She even slipped one under my door with a list of her favorite streaming titles and a line at the bottom that read, "You owe me at least 3 endings." I told my landlord about the harassment. He said he couldn't do much unless she did something physical. "Maybe just give her the Wi-Fi password back and keep the peace," he said, as if that were a normal solution. It got even more ridiculous. One night, I noticed my internet speed tanking. Like 1998 dial-up slow. I checked my router and noticed a weird new device connected to the network, something unfamiliar. I unplugged everything, restarted, changed the password again. The problem disappeared. Turns out, Karen had installed a Wi-Fi signal booster in her apartment. One of those illegal Chinese knockoffs that amplify range so she could reconnect to my service even after I locked her out. I only caught it when I bumped into the delivery guy who brought it to her. He recognized me from the building and said, "Oh, hey, you know the lady upstairs? She bought some kind of signal thingy. Said she was reclaiming her bandwidth. Weird flex." I was so done that I called my internet provider, gave them the details, and they confirmed unauthorized devices had been linked to my modem. They sent a tech out the next day to install tighter security. I wish I could say that stopped her, but no. It made her angrier. 2 mornings later, I came out to find both of my car tires slashed. Not punctured, slashed. Deep, jagged, deliberate. There was no note, but come on, who else? I called the cops. They took a report but said without camera footage, there wasn't much they could do. I mentioned the Wi-Fi lawsuit. The officer raised an eyebrow and said, "That's new." Karen was outside watering her plants like she didn't have a care in the world. She looked up, smiled, and said, "Oh dear. Car trouble? That's what happens when you send bad energy into the universe." I clenched my fists, took a deep breath, and walked back inside. I knew now that this wouldn't go away on its own. Trying to be reasonable wasn't going to work. Trying to ignore her was gasoline on the fire. She thrived on escalation, on drama, on the idea that she was the underdog battling some corporate overlord, when in reality, she was just a bitter woman pirating movies through someone else's router. I needed a different approach, something smarter. She wanted a war, fine, but I wasn't going to fight it her way. I was going to end it mine. At some point, you stop being surprised, you stop blinking at the madness and start accepting it like bad weather. Oh, it's raining lawsuits and Wi-Fi extortion again? Typical Tuesday. But even as I tried to stay calm, the situation had turned from ridiculous to outright dangerous. The slashed tires were a warning. Karen wasn't just entitled, she was escalating. I had to stop her, but playing defense wasn't working. So I decided to flip the script. I began with bait. I set up a decoy Wi-Fi network from an old router I kept in the closet, one I hadn't touched since college. I named the new network something completely innocuous, something so tempting she couldn't resist. I left it unlocked. Open access. A digital honeypot. Then I modified the DNS settings, set up tracking logs, and waited. It took 2 hours. Karen connected almost instantly. Not just her phone, her laptop, tablet, even a dusty smart TV she probably hadn't used since the Obama administration. I watched the traffic flow like a river of dumb decisions. Within minutes, she was downloading movies again, as if nothing had happened. Titles started popping up: bad sequels, romantic comedies, even some very questionable horror films that looked like they were banned in several countries. I took screenshots. I documented everything. I built a timeline, a pattern of access, and a list of files streamed or downloaded. The final cherry on top? Her devices were broadcasting a name she'd used in all of them: Karen_McUnit42. No hiding, no aliases. Just pure, uncut hubris. I met with a tech-savvy friend of mine who helped me organize the data into a neat, digestible packet. It showed repeated unauthorized access, stolen bandwidth, and the digital footprints of someone downloading over 100 gigabytes of pirated content across multiple days. This wasn't just petty theft anymore. This was theft of services and possession of pirated material, multiple times over. I didn't go to the cops. Not yet. Instead, I printed everything out. Neat. Clean. Chronological. When the court date arrived, Karen showed up in a fire engine red blazer with matching heels and a smug expression like she thought this was her big cinematic moment. She greeted the judge like they were old friends at brunch and immediately launched into her rehearsed statement, thick with fake tears and emotional theatrics. Your Honor, I have suffered deeply. I was subjected to internet starvation, a type of psychological cruelty I wouldn't wish on anyone. The defendant clearly acted with malicious intent, disconnecting my access without so much as a warning, despite knowing that I was in the middle of watching deeply emotional cinematic works. The judge, an older man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, raised an eyebrow. You mean he changed the password on his private internet service? Exactly, Karen beamed, as if she'd nailed it. The judge turned to me. Mr. Brooks? I stood and kept my voice steady. Your Honor, I have here documentation of Ms. McGill repeatedly accessing my private network without permission. I also have logs showing the installation of unauthorized signal boosting equipment that allowed her to bypass my password protections even after I secured the network. Karen scoffed loudly. That's nonsense. If the network was accessible, how is it unauthorized? I didn't flinch. Additionally, I've tracked the files she downloaded while using my network. It includes more than 70 illegally pirated movies and shows. I've documented the dates, file names, and IP logs. I handed the packet to the bailiff. The courtroom was silent. Karen looked at the folder like it was full of snakes. Her smugness started to crack. She tried to laugh it off. Those aren't mine. Anyone could have used it. I nodded. Yes. Anyone broadcasting devices named Karen_McUnit42 across 5 platforms. She turned red. Deep red. Almost purple. That's circumstantial. He could have faked all of this. Then why did your laptop automatically connect to the decoy network I set up? I asked. I logged the MAC address. It matched the one you used when you filed a complaint against me for digital starvation. The judge skimmed the documents, his frown deepening. Ms. McGill, do you have any evidence supporting your claim of damages? Karen adjusted her collar. My suffering is the evidence. Do you have any legal right to use Mr. Brooks' internet service? It was unprotected at first, she cried, desperation cracking her voice. He was broadcasting it. That's basically a public offering. So if someone leaves their door unlocked, it's legal to move in, the judge asked dryly. Karen's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. That's completely different. How? It just is. He sighed, leaned back in his chair, and rubbed his face like he was trying to wake from a fever dream. Ms. McGill, I'm dismissing this case. Not only do you lack grounds for a lawsuit, but Mr. Brooks has presented substantial evidence of unauthorized access and illegal downloads originating from your devices. You're lucky this isn't being forwarded to law enforcement. Her eyes widened. You're taking his side? He manipulated the data. He's tech savvy. He made me look guilty on purpose. He didn't make you connect to a network labeled "This is a trap, ma'am." Karen blinked. That wasn't the name. I tilted my head. So you admit you used that network? Her face drained of color like someone pulled the plug on her pride. The judge cleared his throat. Case dismissed. Ms. McGill, if Mr. Brooks chooses to pursue damages for harassment or unauthorized access, you may want to consider legal counsel. Good day. She didn't storm out. She slithered. Shoulders hunched. Mouth tight. No farewell. No parting shot. Just the cold realization that she'd walked into her own trap and set it off with both feet. Outside the courthouse, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks that it was over. No more threats taped to my door. No more spyware routers. No more lectures about digital justice from a woman who thought Netflix was a human right. Karen didn't look at me as she got into her car. She revved the engine like she wanted to run over my soul. But she drove away in silence, and I stood in the parking lot, tired but satisfied, wondering if I'd ever hear from her again. Something told me, not quite. Karen disappeared for a while after the hearing. Not literally. Her car was still parked in its usual spot like a grim monument to stubbornness, and I'd occasionally hear her upstairs yelling at her microwave, but in the way that mattered. She stopped confronting me. No more notes under my door. No more shouting matches through the hallway. No more bizarre, handwritten citations accusing me of cosmic theft of digital waves. I could finally breathe. For the first time in weeks, I sat in my apartment without bracing for a knock, a scream, or a bizarre legal notice accusing me of emotional Wi-Fi vandalism. I even resumed my nightly gaming without checking the network monitor every 10 minutes. Peace, it turned out, wasn't a myth. It just required a Karen-sized disaster to earn it, and then, just as I was beginning to believe that she might have learned her lesson, it happened that I came home one afternoon to find a folded envelope wedged in my mailbox. No address, no stamp, just my name in bold, slanted handwriting. Inside was a single piece of paper. At first glance, it looked like another ridiculous threat, and I nearly tossed it straight into the trash, until I noticed the letterhead. It was from her lawyer. Well, technically, it was from a lawyer, a real one, this time. The letter stated, in overly polite legalese, that Karen was attempting to settle privately to avoid any further escalation of the misunderstanding. It was vague, full of euphemisms like tensions, shared miscommunications, and the ever-charming phrase, mutual technological entanglement. At the bottom, in Karen's own handwriting, she'd scrawled, "Let's call it even. You win. Temporarily." Temporarily, like she was planning a comeback tour. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was just so her, completely incapable of admitting defeat without wrapping it in passive aggression and delusion. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. I'd already won in court, and anything more would only feed her appetite for drama. But just when I thought her theatrical arc had ended with a whimper, the universe delivered its grand finale. About 2 weeks after the settlement letter, I got a knock on the door, not the aggressive kind I'd come to associate with Karen, but a polite one. Curious, I opened it and found a man in a dark blue uniform standing there. He introduced himself as a technician from the building's main cable provider. He was doing routine maintenance and wanted to verify the connection point for my unit. I let him in, showed him the wall jack, and watched as he tested the signal. Then he frowned. "Hey," he said, tapping the small handheld scanner. "You running a second line?" "No," I said, confused. "Just the one." He scratched his head. "Because there's a splitter feeding a second signal upstairs. It's not from our installation." I stared at him. You're saying someone spliced into my line? He nodded. Pretty sloppily, too. Whoever did it probably didn't know what they were doing. Honestly, I'm surprised you've had stable internet at all. I didn't have to say her name. He figured it out from my expression. The technician made a call, climbed the stairs, and came back down with a look of dry amusement. She gave me a cup of tea, then insisted the cable was spiritually mutual. That's a first for me. He filed a report, disabled the connection, and told me the company would be sending an official warning to the account registered under her apartment. Turns out, Karen had not only pirated my Wi-Fi, she'd physically tampered with the building's wiring to leech off my signal again. Even after losing a court case that it wasn't over. She'd doubled down, but this time, it wasn't just my word against hers. There was a tech report, tampering evidence, and company involvement. And this time, I didn't need to lift a finger. By the end of the month, Karen received an official eviction notice. The landlord, after being contacted by the cable company and reminded of the previous court debacle, had enough grounds to terminate her lease. She was given 30 days to vacate. I found out when I passed her in the hallway, trying to juggle a box full of porcelain cats and a pair of half-empty picture frames. She didn't say a word. Didn't glare, didn't smirk. Just grunted and avoided eye contact. It was almost sad, almost that I didn't celebrate. Not outwardly. I just resumed living my life the way it was meant to be lived, quietly, peacefully, uninterrupted. I hosted a small gathering with a few close friends the night after she left. Nothing fancy, just pizza, beers, and a new Wi-Fi name that I proudly set just for the occasion. No bandwidth for Karens. We toasted to it that I don't know where she went. Rumor around the building was that she moved in with her sister 2 towns over, and apparently they're already arguing about digital equity. I don't wish her harm. I don't even wish her karma. I just wish her far, far away from my router. What I learned through all of this? It's not just that entitlement can spiral into absurdity, or that some people think they're owed access to anything that isn't nailed down. It's that boundaries matter. Saying no matters. And sometimes, the most satisfying justice doesn't come from screaming matches or revenge plots. It comes from standing your ground, staying smart, and letting the truth expose the absurdity all by itself. There was a lot I could have done differently. I could have yelled more. I could have retaliated, made things ugly. But in the end, I'm glad I didn't, because nothing beats watching someone dig their own hole, then demand a ladder from the person they tried to bury, especially when that person's only crime was changing his Wi-Fi password.